The final bell rings and you're just in time. You wanna jump on the bus and take a ride. It's time to relax and watch a show or two. But then you'll realize you got homework to do. Now the pencils are down, your brain's about to blow. You gotta chill out, there's just one place to go. You just click play, it's that theme song you know. You're finally here, it's the after school show. Now sit back and enjoy the after school show.
Hey everybody. Hey everybody, welcome to the after school show. Happy Monday. Today is the start of the week. Anyway, today we had testing, which was interesting because we had the whole day to do the test.
Hey, I'm joining you. We had a little typical Monday thing happening.
Yep.
Well, what happened was I was busy trying to make sure I posted it to a couple places on Facebook. And sometimes the stream starts going faster than Facebook can keep up. So I was like, share. Oh, no. You start talking. This is the problem we have when we run the show by ourselves.
Anyway.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so we had all day to test for our test, and by the end of testing, we had 30 minutes left of school, and I have 3 main classes, science, English, and math. So we had 10 minutes for each of those.
10 minutes of testing or studying?
Nope, just studying.
Okay. And how do you feel like you did on your test?
I feel like I did pretty good on my test.
Was this a like standardized test, like fill in the dot thing, or do you do all that on computer now?
Well, we did it on computer, but it was last year's SOL that we took to like practice for the SOL.
Oh, so you're taking a test now that you practiced for earlier last year?
Sorry, no. We were doing a practice on this test.
Oh.
For the SOL that's going to be coming up, but
Okay,
they
so
used that practice, which was the real SOL for the kids who were in 6th grade last year.
I'm totally confused, but hey, thanks for telling everybody about that. That sounds like a Monday to me. Woo! That sounds like a nightmare. All right, well, today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite movies of the year, Black Panther. You can see it's on the poster behind us. We love that movie. And one line really stuck out for Carlin and I, and we discussed it a lot after we left the movie. And we're going to be talking about that because today is March 26th, which is International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Whew, that's a mouthful. I'll probably say it again later and hopefully do a better job. But until we do that, don't forget you can follow us on Instagram.
At After School Show.
And we post some pictures there, some skateboarding videos sometimes, just some crazy, wacky family stuff. And plus, I'm going on a trip next week. Well, it starts spring break next week.
Yeah.
So we probably won't have any regular shows, maybe just some pop-up shows. And I have been invited by Kia. Put that right in front of my face. I've been invited by Kia and out to San Diego, and I'm going to be flying out to rock out with Kia at the Hard Rock Cafe. We're going to be doing lots of fun stuff. I'll give you some more information about that throughout the week, including some of the free awesome swag they sent me. Super cool.
Wow.
All right. Well.
All right. What's in the box?
What's in the box? Boy, I feel like we are just having a Monday kind of a Monday. Woo. All right, last week we gave you clues of what was in this Peppa Pig box. You can't say Peppa Pig without that, right? Peppa Pig, Daddy Pig. Sorry, we have a toddler in our house. So we gave you clues, stick, owl, and lick. Somebody did guess correctly last week on our Thursday show, which is powered
by Life of Dad.
That's right. Our Thursday and Tuesday shows are powered by Life of Dad. And somebody guessed correctly that it was a
lollipop, a Tootsie Roll
Tootsie
lollipop.
Pop. Not Tootsie Roll. Pop.
Tootsie Pop. Tootsie Pop.
Tootsie Rolls or Tootsie Rolls.
Sorry, it says Tootsie Roll.
Roll, yeah. Does it?
Yep.
Okay,
Tootsie
you're
Roll
right.
Pop.
I'm wrong. He's officially right. I'm wrong. How many licks does it take to get to this brain? Obviously, we haven't found out yet. All right. Well, we have a new lunchbox this week. No clues on a Monday.
Yep.
But it is a Beauty and the Beast lunchbox. And I will shake it up for you. Not a lot of noise. Muffled. All right. And we'll start giving you clues later this week. If you guess correctly what's in the box, what do they win, Carlin?
You can win some swag from the Pretty Good Prize Locker, but you gotta subscribe to win.
Where do they subscribe?
You can subscribe at After School Show.
YouTube.
YouTube.com/afterschoolshow. Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's a Monday, man. It is a Monday. Getting back in the swing of things. We did so much this weekend. We planted a whole yard of grass.
Yeah.
Which is already starting to sprout up. We built a floating bunk bed for your little brother.
We did.
And we are tired. All right. Well, today is March 26th, International Day of Remembrance for the victims of slavery and transatlantic slave trade. And why did we start talking about this? Well, at the very end of the movie, Killmonger, who's the bad guy in, I say quote unquote bad guy, because he was actually trying to do some right things. I don't know if he was a bad guy at all. Sure, he murdered people. Okay, I'll give you that. He was a murderer. But do you remember why he was trying to take over Wakanda to begin with? Spoiler alerts if you haven't seen it.
Well,
Hey, Tommy Soros, thanks for joining us.
Well, the Black Panther, his father, killed Killmonger's father.
Right.
So the
Which is
Black
his
Panther
brother.
and Killmonger are cousins.
Right.
And he wants the throne.
But he wanted the throne, but he wanted to take Wakanda's technology and get it to other African American races throughout the world.
Yeah.
Or anybody that was oppressed, he said. Now, that means giving them weapons and all that kind of stuff, and that wasn't like the best, like, hey, let's give those people weapons so they can destroy everybody. Okay, I get that. But he wanted to give the technology to people that were not lower class, but oppressed. People that weren't in power. Okay, but at the very end of the movie, they talk about putting him in jail.
Yeah.
Or whether he would have to die. And what does Killmonger say?
He says, nah, just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships because they knew death was better than bondage.
Okay, now we had a conversation when we left the movie, and I said, Tommy Source Rack, sorry, is saying, will there be after school show during the spring break? Probably be some pop-up shows. Maybe not every day like we normally do, but there'll probably be some surprise shows, so you want to keep your eye out.
Cool.
Okay, so when we left the movie, I said, did you understand what he meant about my ancestors jumped from the ships because they thought death was better than bondage? And you kind of didn't really have a good, you weren't locked in on what he meant at first, right?
Yeah. Well,
So-
I didn't know exactly what it meant. I knew that like he would rather die than be locked up with them, but I didn't know like what he was like.
What he was referring
Sorry,
to.
what he was referring to. Yeah.
So now that we've talked about it, what was he referring to?
He was referring to the African Americans who were on the ships who jumped because they knew that death was better than being captured.
Right, all the African Americans that were brought in. Okay, so in talking about the transatlantic slave trade, we've got kind of 9 facts today that we're going to talk about. Now, these are the kind of things that the, like I said, quote-unquote bad guy from Black Panther was talking about. So, is this a weird video? We're bringing up Black Panther and we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade? It's not really. That movie was really versed in oppressed people from Africa being taken from their homes, Wakanda kind of staying hidden with their alien technology from the comet that came down with the, with the power of that special metal that they have, right?
Vibranium.
Vibranium, and keeping it to themselves. They prospered while staying hidden in Africa, and other people other than Killmonger, even his father, they wanted to share that stuff, and it was based on the slave trade spreading people out from Africa, right? So I think these go very well together. I think it's pretty cool. So why don't you go ahead and read number 1? We've got 9 quick facts. Hey, trust me, if this sounds boring, it's not. This is stuff that you need to understand as an American if you live here, or as a person from another country. Maybe your country was affected by it. Maybe your country was one of the ones that we're going to talk about that propagated slavery throughout the world. Or maybe you just need a little bit more education on the subject. So why don't you go with fact number 1 about the transatlantic slave trade?
Okay, number 1. When most people consider the phrase slave trade, they are thinking of the Atlantic slave trade. This slave trade started during the 15th century and continued to the 19th century.
Right. Now, there was also, and I don't think I have it on here, but the Arabs, the Arab country, not the Arabs, Arab areas started slave trading from Africa. So, I hate saying the Arab nations, ancient Arab nations started slave trading from Africa, and it's said that that is believed to still be the reason people look down on cultures with darker skin tones, because of them bringing slaves from Africa, and of course the darker skin tones from that area, starting so far back in history, in antiquity. And that is, you know, what started the whole thing. The Egyptians had slaves, you know, in Egypt and the Arab nations. So all of the time we've had recorded history of human beings, one human being has taken advantage of another human being and been willing to sell them into slavery. So that's, you know, it's been going on as long as there are people, which tells you that we've got a long way to fight. And if you think slavery is over, just wait until we talk about some of this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So the second fact is that the Europeans essentially tapped into the slave market that already existed and just exploited it for their own purposes. Here's something people don't realize. It was actually cheaper for European nations to make European slaves.
Oh, wow.
It was easier for European white people to make other European white people. It was easier and cheaper because they had access to them. But because there was already a slave trade that existed based in Africa, the Europeans were like, hey, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to jump on this and use it for ourselves, which is really, really horrible. Okay, so why don't you go with number 3?
All right, number 3. The Portuguese were the first to enter the Atlantic slave trade in the 16th century. For the next 4 centuries, they would remain the primary actors. By the time it was abolished in the 19th century, nearly half of all slaves traded in the Atlantic slave trade had been shipped to Portuguese colonies like Brazil.
Okay, so 4 centuries, how long is that?
That's 4,000 years?
400 years.
Sorry.
So for 400 years, the Portuguese were like the primary actors or people that were working the slave trade. And did you hear what it said? By the 19th century, nearly half of all slaves traded in the Atlantic, so across the ocean over to where, you know, America and everything is, half of them had been shipped to Portuguese colonies. That's crazy. So a fourth fact is that although most people think of the slave trade as being British ships taking slaves from West Africa to the United States, this only accounted for a little over 6% of all slaves. Crazy, right? The vast majority, roughly 60%, were sent to Spanish and Portuguese South America. So, which is why you have, you know, the difference in skin color and nationalities and all of that kind of stuff in South America, because it's just so broad, because you have the Spanish, the African, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's crazy. Yeah. Why don't you go with number 5 there?
All right, number 5. Historians estimate... Ooh, excuse me.
That's all right.
The historians estimate that approximately 12 million African slaves entered the Atlantic trade between the 16th and 19th centuries. About 1.5 million died on the ships during transport, and 10.5 million were sold into slavery, mostly in the Caribbean. Another 6 million were sold to Asian slave traders, and yet another 8 million were destined for slave markets on the continent of Africa itself.
Okay, so there's a lot of numbers. I know we read a lot of numbers there, but here, let me hit the highlights. 1.5 million out of the 12 million in those years 1.5 million died on the ships. Just died between Africa and getting to South America or the Caribbean. Okay? 6 million were sold to Asian slave traders. So 6 million went east. And we always think about the slave trade coming west, coming to America, great movie, which is about an African coming to America, not a slave. So we think about African slaves coming to America and South America, the Caribbean, but we don't think about them going to Asia. 6 million were sold to Asian slave traders. Another 8 million were destined for slave markets in Africa itself. So from the west coast of Africa, shipped to other, or not shipped to, but hauled to, carried to other African countries. So that's crazy. All right, slave ship captains packed anywhere between 350 and 600 people on their boats. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal to us now when we're thinking about it, because a cruise ship can have 5,000, 10,000 people on it nowadays. We think of these gigantic ships, but these were wooden ships with sails on them. And when 350 to 600 slaves were on a ship, they were literally stacked on top of each other, people, as if they were cargo, and they laid next to each other all around the ship, just laying in disease. Excuse me. Wow. 350 to 600 people were on their boats. The quarters were so cramped that the victims could barely move on the 2-month voyage. 2 months, barely able to move. Many died of disease because they slept in their own urine and feces.
Ooh.
Others committed suicide. Now this is where it ties into that quote from Black Panther. Others committed suicide by escaping or jumping overboard. Even the sailors, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the European, the white sailors, even the sailors didn't like working on slave ships, and many of them died of disease because there were so many people crammed into such a small place, and it was so dirty. And that was good for profits, though, for the slave traders, because the captains had to pay fewer people when they got there. Isn't that disgusting?
Yeah.
So not only were they participating in the slave trade, also the people that they hired to work the slave boats, if they died, they're like, whew, I don't have to pay Joe over there. It was the worst.
So bad.
It was the worst. All right, why don't you go with number 7? Hey,
right.
Don't forget to stay tuned. We're going to spin the wheel weekends and show you an awesome video from PBS.
All right, number 7. Upon the arrival in the Americas, usually the Caribbean, slaves were held at seasoning camps. Dysentery was the leading cause of death here, and nearly 5 million slaves died in these camps.
So 1.5 million died on the ships. 5 million died in the seasoning camps. Seasoning camps were to like get them acclimated to where they were. They're coming from Africa, dry heat. They're coming to the Caribbean. It's muggy, it's wet. There's different diseases over there. There's different fauna, the land. Everything they're breathing is different. Dysentery is where you're throwing up or having diarrhea and you just lose all of the water in your body and you die.
Ooh.
That's the miserable way to die. So 5 million plus the 1.5 million that died on the ships. That's 6.5 million slaves.
That's crazy.
And let's stop saying slaves. 6.5 black people from Africa were murdered. Okay. Sugar plantations were the reason for about 84% of slaves being brought to the New World. We always think about cotton because of the South. You know, I'm from the South. We talk about that. That's all they ever seem to talk about in school in America is the cotton fields. But sugar was 84% of the slaves were brought for sugar to the New World. The vast majority would end up in Brazil from the Portuguese bringing it through. All right, why don't you hit the last one?
All right. Number 9, although every single government on earth has officially
in quotes,
banned slavery, it still remains a huge problem. There are actually more slaves in the world today than ever before. By some estimates, up to 50 million people live in modern-day bondage. Most of these slaves are in Southern Asia, over 20 million, but the rest of Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa, and the Middle East all have high levels of slavery as well.
So think about that. They're currently, because there's more people in the world,
Yeah.
And we're healthier generally. There's probably more slaves now than the times we think about as the days of slaves. 50 million people could be a modern day bondage. This is slavery through trafficking, slavery through like just what we think of now as like a modern factory, but the person has to work there because they have no choice and they're given the only wage that's doled out. So what's called a slave's wage. Yeah, you're getting paid barely enough to keep you alive to work for that place. That's slavery. You know, oh, I'm going to pay you just enough to show up here every day and not die. And maybe not that much. And your children have to start working at 6 and 7 and 8 years old. Yes.
And the more I think about it, it's just like so, it just almost makes me want to cry because it's so sad.
It definitely
does. That humans, the same equality, they're both humans, one is overpowering the other, and it's just not right.
And now this says most of it is in Southern Asia, over 20 million. So these are Asians enslaving Asians, just like we saw, Europeans did plenty of horrible things to African Americans, or Africans, when they brought them to the Americas, they became African Americans. But remember, what number did we see? There were 8 million slaves from Africa that went to other places in Africa. So they don't even have the excuse to use of, oh, I thought you were different than me, so you deserve to be a slave. It's the same people. You're looking at each other in the face, seeing a mirror image of yourself. Obviously, they're from different areas and tribal units and things like that.
That's just so sad.
But you just don't care. You're enslaving that person. It's brutal, man. It's very brutal. So how does that tie into Black Panther? Well, the bad guy in Black Panther, he was trying to fight against years and years and years and centuries of systematic oppression. Systematic oppression is oppression that's built into the way of life, into government, into how things work.
Yep.
Okay? And that is what this is. Whole countries that were built on slavery. Countries that only became relevant because of the sugar population production or the cotton production. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what they're talking about in that movie. So when you watch Black Panther, if you think, oh, this is too political. No, it's something you really should look up. You should read about. You should watch a video, which brings us to the video of the day.
All right.
Today's video of the day has a picture of how people were packed in slave ships, stacked beside each other, stacked on top of one another. And it's a PBS series that was done on the slave trade, and I think it's a 4-part series. You can watch it on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes if you go to youtube.com/afterschoolshow.
All right, well, it's time to spin the Wheel of Weekends.
Hopefully we got a lighter note here so we can jump from a heavy topic onto something a little more exciting, and that's spinning the Wheel of Weekends. Why don't you give it a spin, Carlin?
All right. And this
All right, and we landed on Adopt Me. So
that means, that means that we will be giving money to the adoption charity, Bethany.org, that helped you adopt me.
That's right. So that is a very good positive note. I'm glad it landed. Sure, I would have liked somebody to win free pizza or something. But it's a positive note that we landed on Adopt Me so we can donate to a charity that helps kids in need, kids that don't have parents, that pray every day like Carlin used to, for a mom and dad of their very own.
All right, guys, remember you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/afterschoolshow.
And don't forget, tomorrow is Tuesday, which means our episode will be powered
by Life of Dad.
And every Tuesday and Thursday we have an episode for Life of Dad. I believe that tomorrow we're going to be talking about pranks. Easter pranks, and we've got some really good ones. These are pranks that you can play on your kids if you're a parent, or on your fellow kids if you're a kid, maybe even your parents, because let's face it, when you guys go to sleep, we eat your candy. It's just what we do. That's what Halloween and Easter candy's for. Parents and sleeping children. So don't forget to click the thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching, click a like on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe, youtube.com/afterschoolshow. If you're watching this on Facebook and you thought, hey, wow, those guys delved into some deep topics today, we'd appreciate it if you click the share button.
Yeah.
Because that'll get us around Facebook and tons of people will get to see the show.
Thanks for watching, guys.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow, same time, next time.
Click here and subscribe to our channel, and click here if you want to watch more awesome videos. Come on, click.